The funeral was on a wet Tuesday, and I stood alone at the edge of the open grave, rain soaking through my winter coat. The cemetery was a bleak landscape of gray stones and bare trees under a dark sky. The simple casket was lowering into the earth. No flowers, no reception, no other mourners. Just me. My name is Walter Cooper. I am 68 years old, and until that day I believed I knew my own family. I had spent my life teaching history and carving small wooden animals in my workshop, a simple, quiet life. But as I stood there in the mud watching the casket go down, I had no idea my world was about to shatter. I didn't know Clara Vance well. For 8 years she lived next door to my son's house, but we had never spoken more than a few words. Julian had bought his place in a quiet Hartford suburb, right after he married Rebecca. I visited them occasionally, but they always kept the blinds drawn on that side of the house. I had seen Clara in her yard, hanging laundry or sitting on the porch with a book, a quiet woman who kept to herself, or so I thought. Then, 2 weeks before her death, my son Julian pulled me aside after Sunday dinner. His face was tense, and his voice was tight. He told me, "Dad, stay away from that woman next door, Clara. She is dangerous. She has been spreading terrible lies about Rebecca and me. Just trust me on this." I nodded. Julian was my son. I trusted him. I had no reason to doubt him. But then, 3 days ago, I saw the obituary. Clara Vance, 35, passed away unexpectedly in a car accident. She was survived by her 8-year-old son, Leo. Since no one else seemed to care and the grave was empty, I decided to attend. I expected to see friends or coworkers. Instead, it was just the cold rain. As I turned to leave, a woman in a dark coat stepped into my path. She was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes. "Mr. Cooper?" she asked. I stopped. "Yes," I replied. "My name is Abigail Ross," she said. "I'm an attorney. Clara Vance left this for you." She asked me to deliver it personally after her passing. She pulled out a large, damp envelope. My name, Walter Cooper, was written across the front. "Why me?" I asked. Abigail looked at me with pity. "She said you would understand once you read it," she whispered. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the gray mist. I didn't open it in the car. I waited until I was safe inside my own kitchen, with the front door locked. I sat at the table and tried to stop my hands from shaking. I had lived in this house alone since my wife passed away 5 years ago, and my workshop was my only refuge. But the carving tools on my workbench couldn't help me now. Finally, I tore the envelope open. Inside were 3 things: a 6-page letter, a stack of documents, and a sealed envelope marked DNA test results. I unfolded the letter first. "Dear Walter," it began, "if you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry you have to learn the truth like this, but there is no one else I can trust. 10 years ago, I met your son, Julian. He was 28, and I was 25. We worked together at a marketing firm in Hartford. He was charming, and we fell in love. When I told him I was pregnant, everything changed. He stopped returning my calls. 2 weeks later, I saw him with another woman, Rebecca. Within 3 months, they were married. Then one night, Julian showed up at my apartment. He was drunk, and he looked terrified. He told me, "I can't be a father, Clara, not after what I did." He confessed that a month before I told him I was pregnant, he had been driving drunk. On a dark stretch of Elm Street, he hit a pedestrian, a man walking home from work. Julian said the man hit the hood, fell to the pavement, and didn't move. Julian panicked and drove away. He didn't call for help. The next morning, he took his car to a private garage, paid cash to get the damage fixed, and never spoke of it again. He was too afraid of being caught. I stopped reading, my chest tightening. Julian? My son? The boy I had raised? He had taken a man's life and simply driven away? I forced my eyes back to the page. I was 25, pregnant, and alone. Clara's letter continued. Julian never came back. He and Rebecca moved into their home, and I had Leo. For 8 years, I raised him by myself, working 2 jobs, but I could never stop thinking about the man Julian hit. His name was Victor Martinez. I found the old news articles. 2 years ago, I bought the house next door to Julian. I wanted my son to see the child he had abandoned, but it became a nightmare. Julian and Rebecca built a 10-foot fence between our yards. They filed endless noise complaints and property line disputes. Rebecca threatened me. She said if I didn't leave, I would regret it. And Walter, Rebecca is not pregnant. She has been faking it. It is all a lie to make me look like an unstable stalker. I am terrified. I think they are going to hurt me. If anything happens to me, please protect my grandson. His name is Leo. He is 8 years old and he is your family. The DNA test is in this envelope. Please protect him, Walter." My hands shook as I set the letter down. I reached for the sealed white envelope and ripped it open. The document inside was printed on official letterhead from a medical laboratory in Hartford. Paternal grandfather, Walter Cooper. Child, Leo Vance. Probability of relationship, 99.97%. I stared at the number, 99.97%. It was undeniable. I had an 8-year-old grandson living right next door to my son's house. For 8 years, Julian had let him live in the shadow of a 10-foot fence, pretending he didn't exist. The documents Clara Vance had left behind were detailed. I spread them out across my kitchen table under the single hanging light bulb. There was a photocopied article from the Hartford Courant dated August 16, 2015. The headline was small, buried on page 4, "Hit and Run Claims Life of Local Man." It described how 42-year-old Victor Martinez, an electrical engineer and father of 3, had been found dead at the intersection of Elm and Maple Streets. The police had no description of the vehicle, no witnesses, and no leads. Beside it was a copy of a receipt from a small, unnamed auto body shop in Hartford, dated August 17, 2015. It was a receipt for front bumper repair and a headlight replacement. The total was $1,800, marked as paid in full in cash. No customer name was listed. There were also printed emails from Rebecca to Clara, filled with warnings and legal threats, along with copies of the court filings for noise complaints, easement disputes, and building permits for the fence. I sat in the dark for a long time after reading everything. The house was dead silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about Julian. He had been a bright kid. He had gone to college, gotten a job, married Rebecca, and seemed to be building a good life. I'd been proud of him. But sitting there at my kitchen table, looking at the evidence, I realized I had never really known him. I didn't know the man who could leave a father of 3 dying in the road. I didn't know the man who could build a wall to lock his own son out of his life. I walked to the kitchen window and looked toward the yard next door. The house was dark now, but the 10-foot wooden fence still stood, a massive barrier running the entire length of the property line. I remembered the day they built it. It was 8 years ago on a hot summer afternoon. A moving truck had pulled up to the small house next to Julian's. A young woman with tired eyes had climbed out, carrying a toddler. That was Clara and Leo. The very next morning, a construction crew arrived at Julian's house. By evening, they had erected the fence. It was a solid wall of thick, overlapping pine planks, towering 10 feet high. I had walked over that evening while Julian was putting away his tools in the garage. "What's the fence for, Julian?" I had asked him. He didn't look at me, just kept organizing his wrenches. "Security," he muttered. "Security from a woman and a baby?" I asked, frowning. Julian's face had gone tight, his eyes darting toward the street. "She's dangerous, Dad. She's been stalking us. Rebecca is terrified. Just stay away from her, okay?" I trusted him then. I believed my son. I went back to my house and ignored the fence, but 6 months later, I was clearing dead leaves near the edge of my property line. I noticed a small gap at the very bottom of the fence, where one of the planks had rotted away at the base. It left a hole about the size of a dinner plate. I knelt down and looked through. On the other side, a little boy was sitting alone in the grass. He was about 1 year old, with dark curls and big, curious eyes. He was dragging a stick through the dirt. When he saw my face near the ground, his lower lip trembled, and he began to cry. I panicked slightly. Hey, it's okay, buddy," I whispered. Reaching my hand through the small opening, I waved my fingers. The boy stopped crying, staring at my hand. I reached into my jacket pocket. I always carried small wooden carvings I was working on. That morning I had a little wooden robin, sanded smooth. I pushed it through the hole and laid it on the grass. The boy blinked, crawled forward on his hands and knees, and picked it up. He turned it over in his small hands and then let out a tiny, soft laugh. "Leo." A sharp, frightened voice called out. A young woman ran across the yard, scooping the boy up. Her eyes darted to the fence, and she saw me kneeling there. "I'm sorry," I said, quickly through the hole. He was crying, and I just wanted to help. "I live next door. I'm Walter." Clara looked at the hole, then at the wooden bird in Leo's hands. Her expression changed, a mix of fear and something I couldn't identify. You're "You're Julian's father," she said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "But I'm not here to cause any trouble. I just carved these in my workshop. He can keep it." Clara looked at the toy, then back at me. She sat down in the grass, holding Leo in her lap. Leo squirmed, clutching the bird tightly. "I'm Clara," she said softly, "and this is Leo." That was the beginning. After that, I started coming to the fence once or twice a week. I would kneel by the hole, and Leo would be there, waiting. I brought him other animals, a carved turtle, a rabbit, a horse. As he grew, I began reading him stories through the hole, passing children's books back and forth. When he was 5, I showed him how to hold a block of wood and make the first soft cuts. We spent hours talking through that wooden wall. Clara would sit nearby, bringing me coffee on her side, while I sat on mine. She never talked about Julian. She only told me that Leo's father wasn't in the picture, and that she worked 2 waitressing jobs just to keep up with the rent. I saw the dark circles under her eyes and the exhaustion in her hands. And I saw how Julian and Rebecca treated her. I saw the letters from their lawyers delivered to her door. I saw Rebecca scream at her once in the parking lot of the local grocery store, calling her a parasite. Clara had stood there, silent, holding Leo's hand, her face completely blank. I had wanted to step in, but Julian had told me to stay away, and I had stayed away. 6 months ago, Clara and I were sitting by the fence. Leo was inside taking a nap. "Walter," she had said, her voice barely a whisper through the wood, "if something ever happens to me, will you look after Leo?" I had laughed it off, trying to reassure her. "What are you talking about, Clara? You're young. Nothing is going to happen." "They are hiding something terrible, Walter. Your son and his wife," she had said, her voice shaking. "I can feel it. And I'm afraid one day they'll—" She had stopped, refusing to say more. I should have asked more questions. I should have investigated. But I didn't. And now she was dead, and Leo was alone in some county shelter. I sat at my kitchen table since dawn, staring at the 22 small wooden animals I had carved for Leo over the last 8 years. Clara had kept every single one of them. The attorney, Abigail Ross, had delivered them in a separate cardboard box along with the envelope. There was the tiny robin, a lopsided turtle, a horse with a chipped ear, and a little howling wolf. They were all worn smooth, polished by the hands of a little boy who had held them close behind a 10-foot wooden fence. The DNA test results lay beside them, the numbers sharp and undeniable, 99–97% probability of relationship. I had a grandson, and he was currently sitting in a county shelter, completely alone. I couldn't just sit there. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Child Protective Services in Hartford. The phone rang 3 times before a woman answered. "CPS. This is Miss Taylor." I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Walter Cooper. I'm calling about a boy, Leo Vance. He is 8 years old. I believe he was taken into your care after his mother, Clara Vance, passed away." There was a brief pause, followed by the sound of typing. "Are you a relative, Mr. Cooper?" "Yes," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm his grandfather." Ms. Taylor was polite but cautious. She explained that Leo was currently in a temporary foster home. She asked me a series of questions. How I knew Leo, why I hadn't come forward earlier, and what my living situation was. I told her the truth, or at least, the parts of the truth that didn't involve a hit and run or my son's crimes. I told her I had been a neighbor, that Clara had kept our relationship secret from my son, and that I had only just received the DNA results. She agreed to schedule a supervised visit for Friday morning. "A child psychologist, Dr. Evelyn Ward, will be present to ensure Leo is comfortable," she added. After I hung up, the anger that had been simmering inside me since yesterday finally boiled over. I looked at the DNA test, then at the photocopied article about Victor Martinez, the man my son had left to die in the street. I needed to look Julian in the eye. I dialed my son's number. He answered after 2 rings, his voice casual. "Hey, Dad, everything okay? I need you to come to my house, Julian, now," I said. My voice was cold, stripped of any warmth. A pause. "Right now?" "Rebecca and I are in the middle of preparing a listing for—" "Now, Julian," I repeated, and then I hung up. He arrived 15 minutes later. He let himself in, his eyes scanning the kitchen. "What's going on, Dad? You sounded strange on the phone." I didn't sit down. I stood by the table, my hands resting near the stack of documents. "I went to a funeral on Tuesday, Julian." Julian's body went completely still. The casual look on his face vanished, replaced by a tight, defensive mask. Whose funeral? Clara Vance. The woman who lived next door to you for 8 years. Julian let out a short, bitter laugh, shaking his head. Dad, I told you to stay away from her. She was a psycho. She's gone now. Honestly, it's a relief. A relief? I took a step closer to him. She was 35 years old, Julian. She died in a car accident, leaving an 8-year-old boy behind. And you're relieved? You don't know what she did to us, Dad. She moved next door on purpose to stalk Rebecca and me. She spread lies about us in the neighborhood. We had to build that fence to protect ourselves. We had to file those lawsuits just to get some peace. Is that why you built the fence? I asked, my voice rising. To protect yourselves? Or was it to hide the fact that Leo is your son? Julian froze. All the color drained from his face and his mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Who? He finally stammered. Leo. The 8-year-old boy you've been staring at through your window for 8 years. Your son. I don't know what you're talking about, Julian said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He turned toward the door. Rebecca is waiting in the car. I have to go. Read this, I said, picking up the DNA test report and thrusting it into his chest. He didn't want to take it, but his hands moved automatically. He unfolded the paper. I watched his eyes scan the results, and I saw his hands begin to tremble. Where did you get this? He whispered. Clara's attorney gave it to me at the funeral, along with a letter, a 6-page letter, Julian. Julian looked up, panic written all over his face. What did it say? It said you abandoned your own child. It said you and Rebecca spent 8 years terrorizing a single mother, and it said you hit a man named Victor Martinez in 2015 and ran. Julian dropped the paper. She lied, Dad. She was crazy. She made all of it up to destroy me. You can't believe her. It's a court-certified DNA test, Julian. And the receipt from the auto shop? The cash payment for the bumper the day after the hit and run? Did she make that up too? Yes, she did. It's all a setup. Julian was shouting now, his chest heaving. She was obsessed with me. She wanted to ruin my life, and now she's poisoning you against me. I'm your son, Dad. You're going to believe some dead stalker over your own blood? I want you to tell me the truth, Julian, right now. Did you hit that man in 2015? Julian stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and terror. He didn't answer. He just backed away toward the door. If you believe her, then you're dead to me, he spat out. You're a traitor to your own family. He turned, slammed the kitchen door so hard the glass rattled, and stormed out. I sat back down at the table, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt a strange, dull ache in my chest, a tightness I hadn't felt before. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my heart medication bottle. I had been taking these pills for 5 years, 1 tablet every night to regulate my blood pressure. I took one out, swallowed it with a glass of water, and stared at the empty kitchen, wondering if I had just lost my son forever. The stack of documents Clara Vance had saved wasn't just evidence of a hit and run, it was a record of systematic cruelty. I spent the next day going through the rest of the file she had left in the attorney's care. Among the legal filings was a small, spiral-bound notebook. It was Clara's diary. As I read the entries, my blood ran cold. The woman my son had married, Rebecca, was a monster, and Julian had stood by, a silent accomplice to every single act. One of the early entries was dated September 12, 2018. Clara had just moved next door. I saw him today, she wrote. Julian was in the yard. He saw Leo in his stroller. He looked right at him, then turned around and walked inside. 2 hours later, a surveyor was in my yard. They are putting up a fence. Julian told the surveyor I was a trespasser. By October, the 10-foot fence was up, but the fence was just the beginning. The diary detailed how Rebecca had turned their neighborhood into a weapon. An entry from May 14, 2020, another citation from the city. Rebecca reported me for a noise violation. She claimed Leo was screaming in the yard at 6 a.m. Leo was asleep in his bed at that hour. The city inspector came to my door. I had to show him Leo's medical records to prove he was healthy. My lawyer says it costs $250 every time we respond to these city notices. I don't have the money. In another entry, Clara described how she received a citation because her trash cans were left on the curb on a Tuesday morning, even though trash pickup was on Thursday. She later found out from a neighbor's security camera that Rebecca had walked over in the middle of the night, dragged Clara's trash cans to the street, and photographed them to send to the city code enforcement officer. Over 8 years, Clara had been cited for minor issues 34 times. Fences, overgrown grass, trash cans, noise, water runoff. None of the complaints ever went to court because they were completely baseless, but Clara had to hire a lawyer to write responses to prevent being fined. According to her receipts, she had spent $8,400 in legal fees just to defend herself from their harassment. But the most disturbing revelation in the diary was about Rebecca's pregnancy, an entry from June 8, 2023. Rebecca came to the grocery store today. She saw me in the aisle. She had a round, pregnant belly under her dress. She leaned close to me and whispered, "If you don't sell this house and leave, I'll make sure you lose your son. The neighborhood already thinks you're a stalker. Who do you think they'll believe? A crazy single mother or a pregnant wife protecting her home?" She smiled when she said it. "Walter, she isn't pregnant. I've seen her trash. I've seen the medical supplies she throws away. She goes to no doctor appointments. She is faking it. She wears foam inserts to make her belly look big. She wants to create a narrative that I am harassing a pregnant woman so the police will arrest me." I stared at the page, my hand trembling. Rebecca had faked a pregnancy for over a year. She had walked around the neighborhood, attending baby showers, collecting gifts, and pretending to be a happy, expectant mother, all to build a case against a poor, struggling woman next door. Rebecca had spent years poisoning the whole block, telling everyone that Clara was an unstable, dangerous woman who was obsessed with her husband. The neighbors believed her. We all did. We saw the pregnant belly. We saw the nice young couple, and we assumed the single mother next door was the problem. We fell for the lies, and Julian had gone along with it. He had lied to me, telling me Rebecca was pregnant, that she was scared, that Clara was stalking them. He had used his wife's fake pregnancy to justify his hatred. I remembered how proud I had been when Julian told me he was going to be a father. I had offered to build a wooden crib in my workshop. He had declined, saying they already bought one. Now I knew why. There was no baby. There was never going to be a baby. It was all a calculated, sick charade. An entry from March 3, 2024, just 9 days before Clara died. I heard a noise outside near my car at midnight. I looked out the window and saw a shadow near the front wheel. It was a woman with blonde hair, Rebecca. I tapped on the glass and she ran back to her yard. I checked the tires in the morning, but they looked fine. "I'm scared, Walter. I'm afraid to drive the car. I think they are going to do something to me. If I die, please don't let them have Leo. Please protect him." My heart pounded. Clara had seen Rebecca near her car at night. 3 days later, Clara was dead. The police report said her car had gone off the road on a curve, hitting a concrete wall. The report blamed it on speed and wet pavement. But Clara's diary suggested something far worse. I sat back, the weight of the realization crushing me. Clara had spent 8 years living in terror. She had reached out to me through a hole in the fence, not just because she wanted Leo to know his grandfather, but because she was desperate for an ally. She was drowning, and I had thrown her nothing but wooden toys. I had listened to my son's warnings, minded my own business, and stayed on my side of the fence. My silence had allowed this to happen. I looked at the clock. It was Thursday evening. Tomorrow morning was my supervised visit with Leo. I couldn't undo the past. I couldn't bring Clara back, but I could get my grandson out of that shelter. I went to my closet and pulled out a clean suit. I packed a small bag with the 22 wooden animals, wrapping each one carefully in a soft cloth. I was going to bring him home. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head on the drive over. But now that I was sitting in the narrow waiting room of the Child Protective Services office in Hartford, I couldn't remember a single word. The walls were painted a pale yellow, probably meant to feel cheerful, but it just looked tired. There was a plastic bin of toys in the corner, a couple of faded posters about foster care on the wall, and a clock that ticked too loud. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. The new wooden bird I had carved last night, a robin, with the words "For my grandson with love" carved along the base, was tucked safely in my coat pocket. The door opened. "Mr. Cooper?" A woman in her 40s stepped out, a clipboard in her hand. Her smile was warm but professional. "I'm Ms. Diana Taylor. We spoke on the phone." I stood up, shaking her hand. "Yes, thank you for arranging this." "Of course," she said. "This is Dr. Evelyn Ward, our child psychologist. She will be sitting in on the visit today just to monitor how Leo is doing and make sure he feels safe." Dr. Ward was younger, with kind eyes and a calm, reassuring voice. She shook my hand gently. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Cooper. Leo has been through a massive trauma. We want to take things very slow today." I nodded. "I understand. I just want to see him." Ms. Taylor smiled. "Give us just a moment." They disappeared down the hallway, and I stood there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway. And then he appeared. Leo was a small boy with dark, messy curls and Clara's eyes, deep brown, wide, and full of a mixture of fear and hope. He stood in the doorway, one hand clutching the strap of his backpack, the other holding a stuffed rabbit that looked like it had been squeezed 1,000 times. "Miss." Taylor knelt beside him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Leo looked at her, then turned his gaze back to me. He took a small, hesitant step forward. I knelt down too, so we were at the same eye level. "Hi, Leo," I said softly, my voice trembling. I'm your grandfather." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, his little face serious and questioning. Then, in a quiet voice, he asked, "Are you the man who gave me the wooden birds?" My throat went tight and I felt tears stinging my eyes. I nodded. "Yes, Leo, that was me." A tiny flicker of light appeared in his eyes. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the newly carved robin. "I made this one for you too." Leo stepped closer, reaching out with both hands. He took the wooden bird gently as if it were made of glass. He turned it over, running his small fingers along the wings, and then he saw the writing on the base. He looked at me, and his lower lip began to tremble. Soft, shaky tears rolled down his cheeks. "Mama said you were the only one who really cared," he whispered. I couldn't hold it back anymore. I pulled him into my arms, and he buried his face in my shoulder, clutching the wooden bird tightly. "I'm here now, Leo," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, I promise." We sat together on the floor of the room. Dr. Ward watched quietly from a chair nearby. Leo didn't let go of the bird. He held it in his left hand and kept his right hand on my sleeve, as if he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. "Leo," I said gently after a few minutes, "can I ask you something about your mama?" He nodded, looking down at his shoes. "Did your mama ever talk to you about the people next door? In the house with the big fence?" His face darkened, and he squeezed his stuffed rabbit. "The bad man and the angry lady." A cold chill ran through me. "What did she say about them?" "She said the bad man used to be nice a long time ago, but then he changed, and the angry lady, she yelled at Mama a lot. She made Mama cry. Mama was very scared of her." "Did you ever see them?" I asked. He nodded. "Sometimes. The angry lady had yellow hair. She came to our house once and screamed at Mama on the porch. Mama told me to go hide in my room under the bed." I glanced at Dr. Ward. She gave me a small nod, encouraging me to continue. "Leo," I said softly, "do you remember the night before your mama's accident?" He went quiet for a long moment, staring at the floor. Then he whispered, "I saw her." "Who did you see, buddy?" "The yellow-haired lady. She was by Mama's car." I looked out my bedroom window because I heard a clinking noise outside. She was bending down near the front wheel. She was holding something shiny in her hand. My heart stopped. Rebecca. She had been at Clara's car the night before the crash. Dr. Ward leaned forward, her voice calm and gentle. "Leo, that is very important. Do you think you could draw what you saw that night for us?" Leo looked up at her, then at me. "Will it help Mama?" "It will help us find out what happened, Leo," I said. "Yes, it will help a lot." Dr. Ward brought over a small table, a piece of drawing paper, and a box of crayons. Leo sat cross-legged on the carpet and began to draw. He worked slowly, concentrating hard. First, he drew a small blue house. Then he drew a gray car. And in the corner, near the front wheel of the car, he drew a figure with long yellow hair, kneeling down and holding a sharp black object. When he finished, he looked up at me, his eyes wide. "Is this okay, Grandpa?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to keep my face calm for him. "It's perfect, Leo. You did a wonderful job." Miss Taylor had called Detective Sean Murphy, the investigator assigned to Clara's accident, and asked him to come to the office. When he arrived, he knelt beside Leo's drawing, studying it closely. "You did a great job, Leo," Detective Murphy said, pulling out his phone. "Can I take a picture of this?" Leo nodded. The detective snapped a few photos, then stood up and looked at me. His expression was grim, his jaw tight. "We need to talk, Mr. Cooper," he said quietly. Detective Murphy led me down the quiet hallway of the Child Protective Services office, far enough away that Leo wouldn't hear us. He leaned against the painted brick wall and crossed his arms. "Mr. Cooper, what the boy just drew and what he said, that matches some details we couldn't explain from the crash site." I took a deep breath. "What details?" "The skid marks," Murphy said. "They started suddenly, but there was no indication of braking. We checked the brake fluid reservoir at the scene, and it was empty. We assumed it ruptured during the impact. But if the line was tampered with beforehand..." I reached into my bag and pulled out Clara's notebook, along with the folder containing the copies of the letters and the DNA report. I handed them to him. "This is Clara's diary. She wrote in it every night. In the last entry, 3 days before she died, she wrote that she saw my daughter-in-law, Rebecca, crouching by her front wheel at midnight. And there's more. My son, Julian. He hit a man in 2015 on Elm Street and drove away. Clara knew. That's why they harassed her. They wanted to drive her out before she told anyone." Murphy's eyes widened as he took the folder. He flipped through the pages of the diary, his face hardening with every line he read. "August 15th, 2015, he muttered. "Victor Martinez. I remember that case. It went cold within a month. We never found the car. My son took it to a private garage the next morning and paid cash," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The receipt is in there. Clara found it." Murphy closed the folder and looked at me, his expression grave. "Mr. Cooper, if this diary is accurate, we are looking at a premeditated murder conspiracy. I need to take these documents back to the station. We'll need to run a forensic analysis on the handwriting and get a search warrant for your son's house and his garage." "Do what you have to do," I said. "Just protect Leo." "We will," Murphy promised. "I'm going to flag your neighborhood for increased patrols. In the meantime, I suggest you stay somewhere secure. If they realize you have this folder, things could get very dangerous." After the detective left, I walked back into the visiting room. Leo was still sitting at the small table, clutching the carved robin in one hand and drawing a picture of a forest with his crayons. Miss Taylor and Dr. Ward were watching him. "Mr. Cooper," Miss Taylor said as I approached, "Dr. Ward and I have discussed the situation. Given the circumstances and the DNA evidence, we are going to file an emergency petition for temporary guardianship on your behalf. We believe it is in Leo's best interest to be placed with a familiar family member rather than stay in the foster system." Relief washed over me, so intense I felt lightheaded. "Thank you," I said. "When can I take him home?" "It will take a few days to process the paperwork and conduct a quick home study of your house," Ms. Taylor explained. "We should have the court order signed by Monday morning. Until then, Leo will remain in his current foster placement. But you can visit him every day." I knelt beside Leo and patted his shoulder. "I have to go now, buddy. But I'll be back tomorrow morning, and on Monday you're coming to stay at my house. We're going to build a new workshop together." Leo looked up, his big brown eyes filled with hope. "Really, Grandpa? Can I carve a wolf?" "You can carve whatever you want, Leo." I smiled. The drive back to my house was a blur. The late morning sun filtered through the bare branches of the oak trees, casting long shadows across the road. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Julian's silver sedan tailing me. Rebecca's words echoed in my ears. She was right about one thing. I was an old man. But she was wrong about my heart. My heart might be damaged, but it was still beating, and it was beating for Leo now. I had just pulled into my driveway when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Julian's name. I answered it. Julian. But it wasn't my son's voice. It was Rebecca's. Her voice was calm, dripping with a cold, mocking sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Walter, I hear you've been spending time at the county social services office." I gripped the steering wheel. "How do you know that?" "Hartford is a small town, Walter. People talk, and Julian is very upset. He says you accused him of terrible things yesterday. He says you're trying to ruin our family. Julian hit a man and left him to die, Rebecca. And you cut Clara's brake lines. I know everything. I have the diary. There was a long silence on the other end. When Rebecca spoke again, the sweet tone was gone. Her voice was flat and dangerous. You don't have anything, Walter. You're an old man with a bad heart. You're imagining things. Clara was a sick, obsessed stalker who couldn't accept that Julian chose me. If you try to bring some bastard child into this family, or if you repeat those lies to anyone else, you're going to regret it. We are your family, Walter. Not some dead girl's kid. Remember that. She hung up before I could reply. I walked upstairs to the spare bedroom. It had been used for storage since my wife passed away. Dust motes danced in the quiet shafts of light. I spent the next 3 hours moving boxes of old history exams and books to the attic, clearing a space under the window. My wife Martha would have been so happy to see this room filled with a child's laughter. She had always wanted a grandchild. I sat on the dusty floor, my back against the wall, thinking about how we had both been blind to Julian's changes over the years. I came back downstairs to the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the bottle of blood pressure pills onto the counter. I picked one up, swallowed it, and collapsed onto the living room sofa. As I lay there in the quiet house, waiting for the medication to kick in, I realized the war had just begun. The next morning, I woke up early, but I felt incredibly heavy. A strange numbness was tingling in my fingertips, and my chest felt like it was being squeezed by a metal band. I brushed it off as stress. I had too much to do. I had to meet Miss Taylor at the CPS office to sign the temporary custody paperwork. I showed up, dressed in my clean suit, and walked out to my car. I was only halfway to the county office when the tightness in my chest became a crushing pain. The road in front of me began to blur, and my vision doubled. I couldn't breathe. My hands slipped on the steering wheel. With the last ounce of my strength, I yanked the wheel to the right, pulling the car onto the gravel shoulder of the road. I managed to put the car in park, but then the world turned completely black. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. The sound of beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic filled the room. The overhead fluorescent lights were blindingly bright. A woman in medical scrubs was standing over me, adjusting the IV drip attached to my arm. "Mr. Cooper, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw. Where am I?" I croaked. "You're at Hartford General Hospital," she said, offering me a small cup of water through a straw. "A passerby saw your car pulled over and noticed you collapsed over the steering wheel. They called 911. You are stable now, but you are very lucky to be alive." I took a small sip of water. My head was throbbing. What happened to me? Did I have a heart attack? "I'm Dr. Brenda Cole," she said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. She looked at me with a serious, troubled expression. "No, you didn't have a heart attack. But when you came into the emergency room, we ran a full blood panel. Your medication levels were dangerously high. Specifically, your blood pressure medication, the beta blockers." I frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "I don't understand. I only take one pill every night before bed, just like my doctor prescribed. I've been on the same dosage for 5 years." "I believe you, Mr. Cooper," Dr. Cole said, leaning forward. "But the pills in your blood system were 4 times the strength of your normal prescription. We had the police retrieve your pill bottle from your house to inspect it. The bottle had your correct prescription label on it, but the actual tablets inside were different. Someone had replaced your 5 milligram tablets with double-strength 20 milligram tablets. Taking just one of those would put your heart into shock. If you had taken another dose tonight, you would have suffered a fatal stroke or cardiac arrest. Someone tampered with your medicine, Mr. Cooper." The room felt suddenly ice-cold. My breathing hitched. "Tampered? Yes," Dr. Cole said quietly. "The police have already been notified. They are treating this as an attempted poisoning." As the doctor spoke, my mind raced back through the events of the week. Who had been in my house? I lived alone. I rarely had visitors. And then, I remembered, on Monday afternoon, before I went to the funeral, Julian had come by. We had stood in the kitchen, and he had seemed nervous, pacing back and forth. Then he had asked to use the bathroom down the hall. He had been gone for about 5 minutes. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. He was my son. He had used that bathroom hundreds of times when he was growing up. but that bathroom was where my medicine cabinet was. My heart medication bottle was kept on the middle shelf. I closed my eyes as a wave of nausea hit me. It wasn't just Rebecca. Julian, my own flesh and blood, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, had walked into my home, opened my medicine cabinet, and replaced my pills with a lethal dose. He had stood in my kitchen, looked me in the eye, and then left me to die in my sleep. The physical pain in my chest was nothing compared to the agony in my soul. A father is supposed to protect his children, but how do you protect yourself when your child becomes the monster? I felt a deep, hollow emptiness inside me, as if a part of my own life had been cut away. I had loved Julian. I had defended him. And now he wanted me dead. Why? The answer was obvious. Clara's letter, the DNA test, the hit-and-run evidence. I was the only one who knew the truth. As long as I was alive, I was a threat to his freedom. If I died of a sudden heart attack, my death would be ruled natural due to my pre-existing heart condition. The letters, the diary, the DNA test, they would all be buried with me, and there was the money. 5 years ago, after my wife passed away, I had set up an $800,000 life insurance policy on myself. Julian was the sole beneficiary. If I died before he went to trial, he would inherit the entire payout, along with my house. He would have the financial resources to flee the country, and the evidence against him would disappear. I lay in the sterile hospital room, staring at the ceiling tiles. Tears of anger and grief slipped down my face. I had spent my entire life trying to be a good father. I had supported Julian, helped him pay for college, and trusted him when he told me Clara was dangerous. And this was my reward. My own son had tried to make me disappear. A soft knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. A tall man in a navy jacket and a tired expression stepped into the room. A police badge was clipped to his belt. "Mr. Cooper?" he asked, walking over to the bed. "I'm Detective Sean Murphy. We met briefly at the CPS office yesterday. I'm lead investigator on the Clara Vance case, and now I'm the investigator on your case as well." Detective Murphy pulled a chair close to the bed, flipping open his notebook. "Mr. Cooper, I know you are exhausted and in shock, but I need you to tell me exactly who had access to your home in the last 48 hours. We found no signs of forced entry at your house, which means whoever did this had a key or was invited inside." I took a deep, shaky breath, the physical pain in my chest flare-ups making it difficult to speak. I looked at Detective Murphy, his pen poised over his notepad. I had spent 68 years protecting my son, but that time was over. Now I had to protect Leo, and I had to save myself. "My son, Julian," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He came to my house on Monday afternoon. We stood in the kitchen and talked. He seemed very anxious, pacing around. Then he asked to use the bathroom. He was in there for about 5 minutes. That bathroom is where I keep my medicine cabinet. My heart pills were on the middle shelf." Murphy wrote quickly, his jaw tightening. "Did anyone else visit your house this week, Mr. Cooper? Any neighbors, friends, or delivery drivers?" "No," I replied. "I live a very quiet life. I've had no other visitors." And on Wednesday evening, after I received the documents from Clara's lawyer, I called Julian and confronted him. I showed him the DNA test showing Leo is my grandson, and I told him I knew about the 2015 hit-and-run on Elm Street that killed Victor Martinez. Julian went white. He denied everything, called me a traitor to the family, and stormed out. He slammed the door so hard the glass shook. That night, I took my night tablet, just like always. I had no idea he had already swapped them on Monday. Murphy stopped writing. He looked at me, his eyes full of concern. "Wait, if he swapped them on Monday, why didn't you collapse on Monday night?" "The doctor said the pills in my bottle were double strength, 20 milligrams instead of 5, I explained. "I had a few 5-milligram pills left at the top of the bottle. I must have taken those on Monday and Tuesday nights. Wednesday night was the first time I reached the bottom of the bottle where the swapped pills were. It only took one of those double-strength pills to put my heart into shock by Thursday morning." Murphy nodded, understanding the logic. "That makes sense. It means the poison was a time bomb, waiting for you to finish your old pills." "Mr. Cooper, we took the pill bottle from your kitchen. We've sent it to the State Forensic Lab in Hartford to print it. If your son's fingerprints are on the inner cap or the bottle, we'll have a direct match. We're also checking the database for any purchases of that specific 20-milligram dosage in local pharmacies." The detective took a slow breath, looking down at his notebook. The 2015 hit and run is particularly difficult. Because it happened 9 years ago, the physical evidence at the scene is gone. But with the receipt from the auto shop and Clara's handwritten account of Julian's confession, we have a starting point. We've already contacted the original officer who handled the case. He kept all the old files, including photos of the tire tread marks. If we can find the repair records from that private garage, we might finally close this case. I nodded, the realization that my son had been carrying this dark secret for 9 years making my head spin. I had lived next to him, shared meals with him, and celebrated holidays with him, all while he was hiding the body of a father he had killed. It was a terrifying thought. "And Clara's car?" I asked. "What about what Leo saw?" "We've already got a team looking at Clara's vehicle in the police impound lot," Murphy said. "We're checking the brake lines under a microscope. If they were cut with a tool, rather than ruptured in the crash, the cut marks will be clean and distinct. We've also obtained a warrant to search your son's home and his computer history. We want to see if there are any search queries about brake lines or heart medication. And we've subpoenaed the financial records of Julian and Rebecca. We want to see if there were any large, unexplained cash withdrawals recently." "She threatened me on the phone yesterday," I told him. "Rebecca did. She called from Julian's phone. She told me I was an old man with a bad heart, and that if I tried to bring Leo into this family, or if I repeated those lies, I would regret it. She said she and Julian were my family, not some dead girl's kid." Murphy's eyes narrowed. "That's a direct threat. We can use that. I'm going to request a tap on your phone line, and I want you to let any calls from them go straight to voicemail. Don't answer. We want to record their voices if they try to threaten you again." "What about Leo?" I asked, my heart aching. "Is he safe? He's in a temporary foster home under a different name," Murphy assured me. "Monsieur Taylor and the CPS staff are keeping his location completely confidential. Julian and Rebecca have no idea where he is. But you need to worry about your own safety now, Mr. Cooper. When you are discharged from this hospital, you cannot go back to your house. It's too dangerous. They know where you live, and they know you survived the poisoning. They might try something more desperate." "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. "I'll arrange a room for you at a quiet hotel on the outskirts of Hartford," Murphy said. "We'll check you in under an alias. I'll have a patrol car stationed nearby. You need to stay there until we can get enough evidence to make an arrest. It shouldn't take more than a few days." I nodded, feeling a heavy weight of exhaustion press down on me. "Thank you, Detective. Get some rest, Walter," Murphy said, standing up and packing his notebook. "You've been through a lot. Let us handle the police work now. We're going to get justice for Clara, and we're going to keep your grandson safe. I'll check in with you tomorrow morning." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of the heart monitor. I lay there in the dark, thinking about Julian. I remembered him as a little boy, holding my hand as we walked through the woods, asking me the names of all the trees. How had that boy turned into a man who could try to kill his own father? I didn't have the answer. I just closed my eyes and prayed that I would live long enough to hold Leo's hand again. I spent 3 days in the hospital, my body recovering from the chemical shock of the medication overdose. By Sunday afternoon, Dr. Cole finally cleared me to leave. Detective Murphy was waiting for me in the lobby. He drove me in an unmarked police vehicle to a quiet, 2-story motel on the edge of Hartford. It was a nondescript place with faded blue siding and a gravel parking lot, the kind of place where people went when they wanted to blend into the background. Murphy checked me in under the name Arthur Cooper, using a generic first name to avoid drawing attention. He handed me the key card to room 114. "Stay inside, Walter," he warned, his voice serious as we stood by the door. "Don't call anyone, and don't go back to your house. We're still waiting for the forensics on the pill bottle and the search warrants. Until we have them in handcuffs, you are in danger." I nodded. "I understand. What about Leo?" "The emergency guardianship petition has been submitted to the family court," Murphy said. "Miss Taylor expects the judge to sign it by Monday afternoon. Once Julian and Rebecca are arrested, we can place Leo with you permanently. Just give us 24 more hours." The room was small and smelled of stale pine cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the quiet weight of the walls pressing in on me. I pulled out my carving tools and the small block of pine wood I had kept in my coat pocket. For the next few hours, I carved. It was the only thing that kept my mind from spinning. I shaped the wood into a small robin, matching the ones that used to nest in the old oak tree in my yard. When I finished, I used a fine tool to carve 5 words along the base. For my grandson with love. I thought about Leo. I had to stay alive for him. The thought of him sitting alone in that foster home was the only thing that kept me going. I fell asleep around midnight. But my sleep was restless, filled with dreams of 10-foot fences and the sound of breaking glass. I woke up early the next morning, just after 5 a.m. The sky outside was still dark, a cold gray mist hanging over the parking lot. I felt a tight, restless energy in my chest. I couldn't sit in that small room any longer. I decided to drive to a local bakery about 3 miles away to get some fresh coffee and rolls. I needed to clear my head, to feel like a normal human being for just a few minutes. I walked out to the parking lot. The keys jangled in my trembling hand, the air was freezing, and the gravel crunched under my boots. My old sedan was parked under a dim yellow streetlight. I got in, turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life. I pulled out of the motel lot and onto the empty road. The streets of Hartford were completely silent. There were no other cars, just the orange glow of the streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. I drove for about 10 minutes, winding through the quiet suburban streets, heading toward the main avenue. And then I hit the hill. It wasn't a steep mountain road, just a long, gradual slope that led down toward a major intersection at the bottom. I had driven this road dozens of times. As the car began to pick up speed on the descent, I reached my foot out and pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. The pedal went straight to the floorboard. There was no resistance, no friction, no hydraulic pressure, just empty air. My heart leaped into my throat. No, 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 I muttered, pumping the pedal rapidly. Down, up, down, nothing. The brakes were completely dead. The car was accelerating now. Gravity pulling the heavy metal frame down the hill. 35 miles per hour. 40, 45. I panicked. I grabbed the emergency brake handle between the seats and yanked it upward with all my strength. There was a loud, sharp, metallic snap. The handle went limp in my hand, the cable completely severed. It was useless. The car was flying now. The engine roaring as the speed climbed past 50 miles per hour. The headlights cut through the dark mist, and I could see the intersection at the bottom of the hill, looming closer. The traffic light was red. A massive delivery truck was driving across the intersection from the left, its yellow clearance lights glowing in the dark. I had seconds to decide. If I went straight through the light, I would slam directly into the side of that truck at 50 miles per hour. I would die, and I might kill the truck driver too. To the right of the road was a concrete median barrier, a raised divider separating the lanes. Beyond it was a steep embankment covered in thick brush and trees. I braced myself, gripped the steering wheel with both hands, and yanked it hard to the right. The tires shrieked against the asphalt. The car lurched violently to the side, the body rolling as the wheels hit the concrete barrier. The impact was deafening. The front bumper crumpled with the sound of tearing metal. The windshield shattered into a web of white cracks. The steering wheel tore out of my hands, and then the world flipped upside down. I remember a sickening feeling of weightlessness as the car rolled over, suspended in the air for a fraction of a second. I heard the metal roof cave in above me, the shriek of glass spraying into the cabin, and the heavy thud of the car slamming onto its side. My head hit something hard, and a hot, blinding pain flared behind my eyes. The smell of gasoline and burning rubber filled the air. I tried to move my arm, but it was pinned beneath the steering column. The beeping of the car's seatbelt warning went on and on, sounding like the hospital monitor from my dream, and then the quiet darkness took over. I woke to the rhythmic, familiar sound of medical monitors beeping. My head was throbbing with a dull, heavy ache, and my ribs felt like they were being crushed every time I took a breath. My left wrist was encased in a thick plaster cast, and my body felt like it had been run over by a freight train. "Mr. Cooper, can you hear me?" A nurse was leaning over me, adjusting the blood pressure cuff on my arm. The white ceiling tiles above looked blurry at first, but slowly came into focus. The accident. I croaked, my voice dry. "You're back at Hartford General, Mr. Cooper," she said gently. "Your brakes failed. You rolled your car down on the Elm Street hill. You have 3 cracked ribs, a broken wrist, and a severe concussion, but you are very lucky to be alive. The paramedics said if you hadn't hit the concrete barrier to avoid the cross traffic, you wouldn't have survived." I closed my eyes, the memory of the weightless slide and the crunching metal flashing through my mind. It hadn't been an accident. I knew it, and they knew it. An hour later, Detective Sean Murphy walked into the room. He looked exhausted, his hair messy and dark circles under his eyes. He carried a heavy manila folder under his arm. He pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. "Walter," he said, using my real name this time. "How are you holding up?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I muttered. "They did it, didn't they?" Murphy nodded, his face turning cold and serious. "Yes, it wasn't an accident. We had the state police accident reconstruction team inspect your car. The brake lines didn't fail, they were cut. It was a clean, professional cut made with a specialized pipe cutter, and the emergency brake cable was snipped with heavy-duty wire cutters." I stared at him, my throat tight. "How did they find me at the motel?" "We found out how," Murphy said, opening the manila folder. "Last night, our team executed a search warrant on Julian and Rebecca's house. While we were there, we seized their computers, personal phones, and a vehicle. In the trunk of Rebecca's sedan, we found a bag containing a professional brake-cutting kit, a pair of rubber gloves stained with brake fluid, and a receipt from a local auto parts store in Hartford dated March 9th for $240, paid in cash, and we found a cheap burner phone." He pulled out a photocopied sheet of paper showing text messages. "There were 37 text messages on the burner phone," Murphy explained. "All of them were between Rebecca's burner and a single unregistered number. On March 8th, Rebecca texted, 'Cut the brake lines tonight. Make it look like an accident. 5,000 when it's done.' That was the night before Clara Vance died. And then, on March 22nd, after they realized you were investigating, she texted the same number. 'New target, the old man. Same method, another 5 grand. Who was she texting?" I asked, my blood running cold. "A local mechanic named Natalie Briggs," Murphy said. "She is 32 years old with a prior record for insurance fraud. We picked her up at her garage 2 hours after your crash. When we showed her the burner phone records and the tools we found in Rebecca's trunk, she broke down. She confessed. She admitted Rebecca hired her to cut Clara's brake lines, and then hired her again to follow you to the motel and cut yours. Rebecca paid her $2,500 in cash as an advance and promised another $2,500 once you were dead." I closed my eyes. The calculated, cold-blooded horror of it was almost too much to process. Rebecca had planned to murder me. She had hired a contract killer to crawl under my car in the motel parking lot while I was sleeping, just to secure an insurance payout and cover up a 9-year-old crime. "Why me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Was it just the diary?" "The diary was part of it," Murphy said. "But we found something else during the search of their house. Under their mattress, we found a locked briefcase. Inside were 2 passports, a printed flight itinerary for a flight to Mexico departing on March 28th, just 4 days from now, and a bank receipt showing Rebecca had withdrawn $15,000 in cash from their joint account. And we found an $800,000 life insurance policy on you, with Julian listed as the sole beneficiary. So if I died, Julian would inherit the $800,000 immediately, and the estate would be settled before any trial could start," Murphy confirmed. "They were going to take the insurance money, use the cash, and run to Mexico. They had no intention of staying to face the police. If you had died in that crash, they would have gotten away with everything." "Where are they now?" I asked, my heart pounding. "We have patrol cars watching their house, and we've flagged their passports with border control," Murphy said, standing up. "But we wanted to wait until we had Natalie Briggs's official signed confession in hand before making the move. We got it 10 minutes ago. I've already dispatched the SWAT team to their house. By the time I get back to the station, Julian and Rebecca will be in handcuffs." "What about my grandson?" I asked, the image of Leo's face filling my mind. "Miss Taylor is waiting at the court right now," Murphy said. "The judge is signing the emergency custody order as we speak. Once we secure the arrest of the parents, Leo will be released to your custody. He will be safe, Walter. I promise you." He patted my shoulder gently and walked out of the room. I lay back against the pillows, my broken wrist aching, my ribs burning with every breath. I had survived. I had beaten my own son's attempts to kill me. And on Monday, I was going to bring my grandson home. I was still in my hospital room when my phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was Sunday evening. The caller ID showed Detective Sean Murphy. I picked it up, my heart immediately beginning to hammer against my cracked ribs. "Walter," Murphy's voice came through, sounding tense but relieved. "It's done. They're in custody. I'm sending a video file to your phone right now. It's the body cam footage from the raid. I want you to see it so you know they are truly off the streets." My phone buzzed again, indicating a file download. I tapped the screen. The video opened, showing the dark, grainy perspective of a police officer's body cam. The footage began in the pre-dawn darkness of a quiet suburban street, the street where Julian and Rebecca lived. 3 black tactical vehicles were parked along the curb, their lights off. A group of SWAT officers in heavy gear, helmets, and carrying rifles moved silently up the driveway. The lawn looked white under a light frost. The camera moved closer to the front door. An officer carrying a heavy metal battering ram stepped forward. My hands shook as I held the phone, watching the battering ram hit the front door. I had built that door myself 15 years ago, a sturdy oak entry that was supposed to keep my son's home safe. Seeing it splintered into pieces by SWAT officers felt like a physical strike to my own chest. It was the end of his home, the end of the life he had built on lies. "Hartford Police! Search warrant!" A voice roared with a deafening crunch. The ram slammed into the front door. The lock shattered, and the heavy wooden door splintered inward. The officers flooded into the house, their weapons raised, tactical lights cutting through the dark rooms. "Get on the ground, police! Down on the ground!" they shouted, their voices echoing through the empty halls. The camera moved into the living room. There was Julian. He was wearing his pajamas, standing in the middle of the room. His hands were raised high in the air, his face completely pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and confusion. He looked so small, so weak, standing there in the beam of the tactical lights. "Down on the ground now," an officer barked. Julian fell to his knees, then onto his stomach, offering no resistance. An officer quickly pulled his hands behind his back and clicked the handcuffs into place. From the hallway, Rebecca stumbled out of the bedroom. She was wearing a nightgown, her blonde hair messy, her mouth open in a silent scream of fury. She tried to back away, but 2 officers grabbed her arms, forcing her against the wall. "Get off me! You have no right to be here!" she screamed, thrashing against their grip. "Julian, tell them they can't do this." But Julian didn't say a word. He just lay on the floor, his face pressed against the carpet, silent. The camera showed both of them being hauled to their feet. Rebecca was still shouting, her face twisted in rage, spitting at the officers. Julian looked hollow, his eyes vacant as they led him out of the house. Outside, 2 patrol cars were waiting in the driveway. The officers separated them, pushing Julian into the back of one car and Rebecca into the other. The heavy doors slammed shut and the video ended. I sat in my hospital bed, staring at the black screen of my phone. My chest felt incredibly tight, but this time it wasn't the medicine. It was a deep, empty numbness. That was my son, the boy I had raised, the boy I had loved, and now he was in the back of a police cruiser, heading to a cell. My phone rang again. It was Murphy. "You saw it?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you, Sean." "There is more, Walter," Murphy said, his voice dropping. "During the search of the master bedroom, we found a drawer in Rebecca's dresser. Inside, we found 6 silicone inserts, shaped like pregnant bellies in increasing sizes. We also subpoenaed her medical records from the Hartford Women's Health Clinic. She had a termination procedure 2 years ago. She was never pregnant. She faked it for an entire year." "So Clara's diary was right," I whispered. "She faked it to make Clara look like a stalker." "Yes," Murphy said. "She used the fake pregnancy to get the neighborhood on her side and to file the harassment complaints with the police. It was a completely calculated narrative, and Julian knew. He went along with the lies. We also found a travel bag packed under their bed. Inside were their passports and a printed itinerary for a flight to Mexico. They were scheduled to fly out in 4 days. Murphy explained that the arraignment would take place on Tuesday morning. We're going to present all the evidence, including the burner phone logs and Natalie Briggs's confession. The prosecutor is confident the judge will deny bail. They have too much cash and travel plans to be released. What are the charges? I asked. For Rebecca, we're charging her with first-degree murder in Clara Vance's death, conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder by poisoning and brake tampering against you. For Julian, we're charging him with vehicular manslaughter in the 2015 death of Victor Martinez, evading responsibility, and conspiracy and accessory to murder. With the burner phone texts, the mechanic's confession, and the travel bags, the evidence is overwhelming. The district attorney says they won't get bail. They are flight risks. I let out a long, shaky breath. And Leo? The judge signed the emergency custody orders, Murphy said. Mrs. Taylor is bringing him to the hospital to see you tomorrow morning. You are his legal guardian now, Walter. He is yours. Thank you, Sean, for everything. Get some sleep, Walter, Murphy said. The worst is behind you now. Tomorrow you start your new life with your grandson. I hung up the phone and set it on the nightstand. The hospital room was quiet, the moon shining through the window, casting a silver light across the floor. For the first time in weeks, the crushing weight in my chest was gone. Julian and Rebecca were behind bars. Clara's death was finally being investigated as a crime, and Victor Martinez's family was going to get answers. But most importantly, Leo was safe. He was coming home to me. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The door to my hospital room opened slowly on Monday afternoon. I had been sitting up in bed, trying to adjust the pillow behind my cracked ribs. Ms. Taylor had visited earlier to confirm that Leo was being prepared to move into my home by Wednesday. But right now, I was waiting for a different visitor. Detective Murphy had called me that morning to tell me he had contacted Elena Martinez, the widow of the man my son had killed in 2015. He said she wanted to see me. A woman in her early 50s stepped into the room. She wore dark blue scrubs under a faded denim jacket, her dark hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked like she had just come from a long shift at a clinic. Her face was lined with a deep, quiet exhaustion, the kind that doesn't go away with a good night's sleep, but comes from carrying a heavy weight for a very long time. She stood near the door, her hands clutched around a small canvas handbag. "Mr. Cooper?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said, leaning forward. "Please come in, Mrs. Martinez." She nodded and walked over to the chair beside my bed, sitting down slowly. She didn't smile, and she didn't offer her hand. She just looked at me, studying my bandaged head and the cast on my left arm. "Detective Murphy told me you were the one who brought him the evidence," she said. "He told me your son was the driver." My chest felt tight, a wave of shame washing over me. I couldn't look her in the eye. "Yes, Julian was the one. I am so incredibly sorry, Mrs. Martinez. I am sorry for what my son did, and I am sorry it took 9 years for you to get the truth." Elena was quiet for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked down at her hands. "Victor was 42 when he died," she whispered. "He was an electrical engineer. He was a good man, a good father. We had 3 children. Our oldest was 15, our daughter was 12, and our youngest was only 8. Victor was walking home from a late shift at the plant. It was only a 6-block walk. He liked the fresh air. He never made it home." Tears began to pool in her eyes, but her voice remained steady, flat, and filled with old grief. "For 9 years the police told me the case was cold," she continued. "They had no leads, no car description, nothing. I had to look at my children every day, knowing the person who killed their father was out there, living their life, driving their car, pretending nothing had happened. I prayed every single night that someone would have the courage to come forward. And now, 9 years later, Detective Murphy calls me and tells me the killer lived in the next neighborhood, and that his father turned him in." I reached for the manila folder on my bedside table with my right hand and slid it toward her. "This is a copy of Clara Vance's letter," I said. "She was my son's ex-partner. He confessed to her in 2016 when he was drunk, and this is a copy of the receipt from the private garage in Hartford. He took his car there at 7 a.m. The morning after the hit and run, paid Whittain $100 in cash to get the bumper and headlight fixed, and told them not to write his name down. Elena took the documents, her hands trembling. She read the letter slowly. I watched her face, the way her eyes scanned the words my son had spoken as he tried to evade responsibility. When she finished, she clutched the papers to her chest, her shoulders shaking as she let out a soft, choked sob. "My oldest son had to drop out of college," she said, her voice cracking. "He was supposed to be an architect, but after Victor died, we couldn't pay the rent. He got a job at a shipping warehouse, working 60 hours a week just to help me pay the bills. My daughter fell into a deep depression. She tried to hurt herself twice. She's 21 now, but she still struggles to look people in the eye. And my youngest, he doesn't even remember his father's voice. All he has are photos." "I know nothing I say can fix what Julian took from you," I said, tears running down my own face. "I raised him. I taught him to be honest, but somewhere along the way, he became a coward. I cannot defend him. I want him to pay for what he did to Victor and what he did to Clara." Elena looked up at me, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She stared at me for a long time, as if searching for something in my face. Then she reached out and laid her hand over my right hand. "You are not him, Mr. Cooper," she said firmly. "You did not drive that car, and you did not stay silent when you found the truth. You risked your own life to bring this to the police. Detective Murphy told me about the poisoning and the car crash. You almost died because you refused to let them bury Victor's name again." "I should have paid more attention back then," I whispered. "I saw his car had a dent in 2015. He told me he hit a deer. I believed him. I didn't ask questions. If I had dug deeper—" "We cannot live in the past, Walter," she said gently, using my first name. "We can only do what is right today. My children and I, we want to testify at the trial. We want to look Julian in the eye and tell the judge what he took from us." "I will be there with you," I promised, squeezing her hand. "I will testify too." Elena stood up, tucking the documents into her bag. She looked at me with a soft, sad smile. "Thank you, Walter. You've given my family something we haven't had in 9 years. We finally have a name, we finally have a face, and we finally have a chance at justice. I hope you get to bring your grandson home soon. He is lucky to have you." "Thank you, Elena," I said. She turned and walked out of the room, her boots clicking softly on the linoleum floor. I lay back in the quiet room, the weight of the Martinez family's 9 years of suffering pressing heavily on my chest. Julian had destroyed so many lives, but as I looked at the carved wooden animals on the table, I knew that bringing the truth to light was the only way to begin healing the damage he had done. On Wednesday morning, I was finally discharged from Hartford General Hospital. My head was still tender from the concussion. My ribs throbbed if I moved too quickly, and my left arm was heavy in its plaster cast, but I felt a surge of strength I hadn't felt in years. Today was the day. I was going to the Child Protective Services office to officially take Leo home. Ms. Diana Taylor was waiting for me in the lobby of the CPS building. When she saw me walk in, she smiled warmly and waved me over to her office. "Good morning, Walter," she said, pulling out a chair for me. "You look much better than the last time I saw you in the hospital. I have some excellent news. The judge signed the temporary custody order yesterday afternoon. All the background checks and the home study are complete. You are officially Leo's legal guardian." The paperwork was stacked on Miss Taylor's desk, thick folders representing the state's custody apparatus. I signed my name 14 times on various lines, indicating my consent to the home studies, the psychiatric reviews, and the monthly visits. Each signature felt like a solid brick in the foundation of Leo's new life. It was official. The state recognized me as his guardian, and no one could dispute it. "Thank you, Diana," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Can I see him?" "He's in the playroom," she smiled, standing up. "He's been waiting for you all morning. He has his bags packed and ready." She led me down the hall to the playroom. I pushed the door open, and there he was. Leo was sitting on a small plastic chair, his little hands clutching the stuffed rabbit. Next to him was a small, faded blue duffel bag. When he looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, his eyes lit up, and he immediately scrambled to his feet. "Grandpa!" he cried. I knelt down, ignoring the sharp protest of my cracked ribs, and wrapped my right arm around him, holding him tight against my chest. He buried his face in my shoulder, his small body shaking slightly. "I'm here, Leo," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm here, and we're going home today." He pulled back, looking at me with those big, serious brown eyes. "Are the bad people really gone?" "Yes, Leo, they are gone. They are in a place where they can never, ever hurt you or your mama again. You are safe with me now." Leo nodded, his small face relaxing. He turned to the blue duffel bag on the chair. "I have something to show you," he said. He unzipped the bag and reached inside. He pulled out a large, soft white cloth. He carefully laid it out on the table in the playroom, and then, one by one, he began to place the small wooden animals I had carved for him over the years onto the cloth. There was the robin, the rabbit, the turtle, the wolf, and the lopsided horse. Every single one of the 22 carvings was there. Not a single one was missing. "Mama kept them in a special drawer under her bed," Leo whispered, running his fingers over the smooth pine wood. "She told me they were special. She said they were proof that someone in this world loved us. Even if we couldn't see them, she made me promise to keep them safe." I stared at the animals, tears streaming down my face. Clara had saved every single one of them. For 8 years, while she struggled to pay rent and defend herself against my son's cruelty, she had kept these little pieces of wood as a reminder of hope. She had passed that hope down to her son. "They are beautiful, Leo," I said, wiping my eyes. "And we are going to set them up on a special shelf in your new room. I built a shelf right under the window where the sun shines in." "Really?" Leo asked, his eyes wide. "Really?" I smiled. "And I have a workbench in my garage. When your wrist is a little stronger and my arm is out of this cast, I'm going to teach you how to carve a wolf. A big one." Leo let out a soft, happy laugh, his first real laugh I had heard since this nightmare began. He began packing the wooden animals back into the duffel bag, wrapping each one carefully in the soft white cloth. Mrs. Taylor stood by the door, watching us with a warm smile. "You two make a great team," she said. "Here is the folder with Leo's medical records, his school enrollment forms, and my direct phone number. If you need anything at all, Walter, you call me. I'll be checking in on you next week." "Thank you, Diana," I said, shaking her hand. "You've been a lifesaver." I picked up Leo's duffel bag with my right hand, and Leo took my hand with his left. We walked out of the CPS building together, stepping out into the bright, cool Wednesday morning sunshine. For 8 years, I had watched this little boy grow up through a dinner plate-sized hole in a wooden wall. I had listened to his voice, read him stories, and passed him toys, but I had never been able to walk down the street with him. I had never been able to hold his hand in the open air. When we finally arrived at my house, I carried his little duffel bag up to his new room. Leo stood in the doorway, looking around in awe at the clean blue walls and the oak bed. He walked over to the window, looked out at the backyard, and then looked at the new shelf. One by one, we lined up the 22 wooden animals under the warm sunlight. The 10-foot fence was still standing next to my house. A physical reminder of my son's lies, but it didn't matter anymore. The wall had failed to keep us apart. Out of the darkness of my son's betrayal, something beautiful and clean had survived. We were a new family now, heading toward our new life. The first week Leo lived with me was about establishing a routine. Every morning, I made him pancakes, and we sat at the kitchen table, talking about the animals we would carve next. In the afternoons, he would sit in the yard, drawing in his notebook while I sat on the porch, my cast resting on a pillow. But the peace was fragile. The shadow of the upcoming trial hung over us. On Thursday evening, Detective Murphy called me. "Walter, we just got the forensic reports back from the state lab. I wanted to give you an update." "What did they find?" I asked, walking into my hallway to keep my voice low so Leo wouldn't hear. "The tool marks match perfectly," Murphy said. "The cut on Clara's front brake line was made with a brand of pipe cutter called Rigid Model 15. During the search of your son's garage, we seized a red toolbox belonging to Julian. Inside was a Rigid Model 15 pipe cutter. The forensic technicians matched the microscopic striations on the cut copper tubing of Clara's car to the blade of the pipe cutter from Julian's box. It's a scientific match. There is no doubt that the tool in your son's garage was the one used to sabotage Clara's brakes." I remembered buying that rigid Model 15 pipe cutter for Julian. It was his 25th birthday, and he had just bought his first house. I had put together a set of professional plumbing and construction tools for him, hoping he would learn to maintain his own place. I had engraved his initials, JC, on the side of the metal casing. The thought that the very tool I had gifted my son had been used to sabotage Clara's car and end her life made me feel physically sick. It was a dark, twisted irony that I couldn't escape. "And the poisoning?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We got the fingerprint results from your heart medication bottle," Murphy continued. "We found 3 distinct prints on the inner cap and the neck of the bottle. They belonged to Julian. His prints were also on the double-strength 20-milligram tablets we found at the bottom of the bottle. He didn't even wear gloves when he swapped them. He must have panicked and rushed." "It's hard to hear," I said, a lump forming in my throat. "But it's the truth. The prosecutor is using all of this," Murphy said. "But the most critical piece of circumstantial evidence we had in the beginning was Leo's drawing. That drawing of the yellow-haired lady kneeling by the car was what gave us the probable cause to search their property and seize the tools. Without Leo's drawing, we wouldn't have known where to look. The prosecutor wants to present the drawing to the grand jury on Monday. Dr. Evelyn Ward has cleared Leo to testify if needed, but she wants to keep his involvement as minimal as possible to protect his mental health. We're going to try to use the forensic matches and the burner phone texts first. If the defense tries to claim Rebecca was never at the scene, we'll introduce the drawing." "I understand," I said. "I'll do whatever is necessary to support the case." "Stay strong, Walter," Murphy said before hanging up. "We're going to secure a conviction. I'll call you when the grand jury makes its decision." After I hung up, I went upstairs to Leo's room. He was sitting on his bed, the 22 wooden animals lined up on the windowsill behind him. He was holding the spiral-bound notebook Clara had used as a diary, the one he had given me on Wednesday. "Grandpa?" Leo asked, looking up as I walked in. "Did you read Mama's book?" I walked over and sat on the edge of his bed. "I read some of it, Leo. Your mama was a very brave woman. She wrote down everything because she wanted to make sure you were safe. She told me that if anything happened to her, I should give it to you," Leo said quietly. "She said you would know what to do." I took the notebook from his hands. I opened it to the last page, the entry dated March 10th, just 2 days before Clara's accident. "I am writing this because I don't know what else to do," Clara had written in her neat, shaky hand. "I saw Rebecca by my car tonight. I know she did something to the wheels. I'm afraid to drive, but I have to go to work tomorrow to pay the rent. If I don't make it, please, Walter, look at this book. Protect my Leo. He is your grandson. He has your eyes." I closed the book, my hands trembling. Clara had known she was in danger. She had known the car was sabotaged, but she had been so desperate, so stretched thin by the financial pressure Julian and Rebecca had put on her, that she had gotten behind the wheel anyway. She had driven to her job because she was afraid of losing her home, and that desperation had killed her. Leo looked at the windowsill where the animals were lined up. "Grandpa, do you think the wooden robin will keep Mama safe in heaven?" I swallowed hard. "I think it will, buddy. I think she sees it every day." He smiled, a genuine, warm expression that made all the pain of my cracked ribs disappear. "I miss her," Leo said, leaning his head against my chest. "I miss her too, Leo, but we're going to keep her memory alive. We're going to keep carving, and we're going to be brave, together." Leo nodded, his small hand holding mine. The trial was coming, and we would have to face Julian and Rebecca in court. But looking at my grandson, I knew I would stand against my own son 1,000 times if it meant keeping this boy safe. The truth was out, the evidence was ironclad, and the wall they had built to hide their crimes had finally fallen. Just when I thought we had finally found some stability, a new storm arrived. It started with a phone call on Friday afternoon, from a number with a California area code. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Audrey Vance. She was Clara's younger sister. She had seen the news of Julian and Rebecca's arrest online and had flown to Hartford immediately. She wanted to meet. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop near the center of town. I sat at a corner table, my broken wrist in its cast, resting on the table, nursing a cup of tea. When Audrey walked in, the family resemblance hit me like a physical blow. She looked so much like Clara it made my chest ache. She had the same dark curls, the same sharp, intelligent eyes, and the same way of slightly tilting her head when she looked around. But where Clara had been soft, tired, and dressed in simple clothes, Audrey was all sharp edges. She wore a tailored gray blazer, carried a designer handbag, and walked in high heels that clicked against the floorboards. She walked over to my table, her expression neutral. "Miss Cooper?" she asked. "Yes," I said, standing up to shake her hand with my right hand. "Please, sit down, Audrey." She sat across from me, folding her hands neatly on the table. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice calm and controlled. "I'll be direct, Mr. Cooper. I'm here because of Leo. I want to take him back with me to San Francisco. I'm filing for custody." The cup of tea felt suddenly heavy in my hand. "Custody?" "Audrey, Clara's will explicitly named me as Leo's guardian. He has been living with me for a week now, and he's finally feeling safe." Audrey leaned back, her expression softening just a fraction, but her eyes remained sharp. "I read the will. But Clara wrote that will when she was desperate and alone. She didn't know I would come back. She didn't know I would want to help. Mr. Cooper, Clara and I, we hadn't spoken in 10 years. 10 years, I asked, frowning. Why?" Audrey looked down at her hands, a flicker of genuine pain crossing her face. "We had a terrible fight when she told me she was pregnant. I was 22, fresh out of college, and I thought I knew everything. I told her she was ruining her life. I told her Julian was a coward who wouldn't come back, and that she should terminate the pregnancy. Clara was furious. She told me I didn't understand what love was. She walked out, stopped answering my calls, and blocked my emails. She cut me out of her life completely. I didn't even know she had moved to Hartford. I didn't know about the fence, or the harassment, or the fact that she was raising my nephew alone. Not until I saw the news 2 days ago. She looked back up at me, tears shining in her eyes. I spent 10 years being angry at her, and now she is gone, and I can't apologize. I can't tell her she was right, but I can do something for her son. I can give him the life Clara struggled so hard to provide. Audrey, Leo has a home here. He has his school, his memories. I live in a 5-bedroom house in San Francisco." Audrey interrupted, pulling out her phone and showing a photo. It showed a beautiful modern home with bay windows and a manicured yard. "My husband Marcus is a senior software engineer. I am a marketing director at a major tech firm. I make $320,000 a year. We are financially stable. We have a stable marriage, and we have been trying to have children for 3 years without success. We have the room, we have the resources, and we have the love. I can give Leo private tutors, music lessons, summer camps, and a guaranteed college fund. I can give him opportunities he will never have here." I felt my chest tighten, the old ache in my ribs returning. "You can give him money, Audrey, but you can't buy a relationship. You have never met him. You didn't send him a card or make a phone call for 8 years. I was the one kneeling in the mud by that rotted fence post, reading him stories and passing him wooden carvings. I was the only family member who was there for him." Audrey's jaw tightened, her professional composure returning. "I respect what you did, Mr. Cooper. I truly do. You were a good neighbor. But sentiment isn't enough to raise a child. You are 68 years old. You just survived a poisoning in a major car crash. You are in a cast. How are you going to run after an 8-year-old boy for the next 10 years? What happens if your health fails again? Leo needs stability, and he needs a long-term future. A 2-parent household in a safe neighborhood is what is best for him." She stood up, reaching into her bag and pulling out a business card, sliding it across the table. "I've hired an attorney here in Hartford. We are filing a custody petition on Monday. I don't want to make this ugly, Mr. Cooper. I know you care for the boy, but I am not going to walk away from my nephew. Not again." She turned and walked out of the coffee shop, her heels clicking on the floor. I stared at the glossy white business card, with her name printed in elegant gold lettering, Audrey Vance, Director of Brand Marketing. The office address was in downtown San Francisco. Her attorney's office was listed on the back. She had resources I couldn't match, and a legal team that would tear into my medical history to prove I was unfit. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I knew the courts in Connecticut prioritized the best interest of the child. On paper, Audrey looked perfect. Young, wealthy, married, with a beautiful home. Compared to a 68-year-old retired history teacher with cracked ribs and a bad heart, the choice seemed obvious. I had to find a way to show the judge that love and history mattered more than bank accounts. I picked up my phone and called Miss Taylor. The battle for Leo wasn't over. It was just moving to the courtroom. The family court hearing was held on Tuesday morning in a small, quiet room on the third floor of the Hartford County Courthouse. Unlike the criminal trials, this room had no gallery, no reporters, and no flashing cameras. It was a space designed for private family matters, but the tension inside was thick enough to choke on. I sat at a polished oak table on the left side of the room. My attorney, Abigail Ross, who had represented Clara in her final days and had agreed to represent me now, sat beside me, her briefcase open and her papers neatly stacked. I wore a gray suit, the left sleeve pinned back to accommodate the plaster cast on my arm. My ribs still throbbed with a dull ache, but I sat as straight as I could. Across the aisle, Audrey sat with her attorney, a tall man in a navy suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly retirement check. Audrey looked composed, professional, her dark curls pulled back in a neat bun. She stared straight ahead, refusing to look at me. Judge Elena Alvarez, a stern woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and graying hair, sat behind the bench. She finished reading through the case file, then looked down at us over her glasses. "We are here today to determine the permanent custody of Leo Vance, age 8. Judge Alvarez began, her voice clear and precise. "We have 2 petitions before the court. One from Mr. Walter Cooper, the child's paternal grandfather, who currently holds temporary emergency custody, and one from Ms. Audrey Vance, the child's maternal aunt. I will hear from the petitioner's counsel first." Audrey's attorney stood up, buttoning his jacket, and walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor, the standard in this court is clear. We must determine what is in the best interest of the child. My client, Audrey Vance, is Leo's biological aunt. She is a marketing director at a Fortune 500 company in San Francisco, earning $320,000 annually. Her husband, Marcus, is a senior software engineer. They own a 5-bedroom home in one of the top-rated school districts in California. They have a stable, loving household, no criminal record, and the financial resources to provide Leo with private tutors, music lessons, and a guaranteed college fund. They can offer him opportunities that Clara Vance could only dream of." He paused, turning his gaze toward our table. His eyes locked onto my plaster cast. "Mr. Cooper, on the other hand, is 68 years old," the attorney continued, his voice dropping to a serious, warning tone. "In the last month alone, he has been hospitalized 2 times. First, for a near-fatal drug interaction. Second, for a rollover car crash on Elm Street that left him with a broken wrist, a concussion, and cracked ribs. While we do not doubt Mr. Cooper's affection for the boy, we must face the medical reality. His health is declining. He is a retired teacher living on a fixed pension. Can a 68-year-old man, recovering from severe physical trauma and managing a pre-existing heart condition, realistically care for an active 8-year-old boy for the next 10 to 15 years? If Mr. Cooper's health fails again, or if he passes away, Leo will be thrust right back into the foster system. We cannot put this child through another trauma." He sat down, looking confident. I felt the air leave my lungs. The words were harsh, but they were logical. The court looked at facts, and the facts on paper were heavily stacked against me. Abigail Ross stood up. She was calm, her voice steady and resolute. "Your Honor, Clara Vance's last will and testament is in the file. She explicitly named Walter Cooper as Leo's guardian. She did not name her sister Audrey, and she did this for a very simple reason. For 8 years, Walter Cooper was the only father figure Leo had. While Ms. Vance was living in San Francisco, earning her high salary and building her career, she did not speak to her sister for 10 years. She did not send a card. She did not know Leo existed. Walter Cooper was the one kneeling at the bottom of a 10-foot fence, reading to Leo, teaching him to carve, and providing him with the only consistency he had. Abigail picked up a folder from our table and held it up. "Mr. Cooper is 68, yes, but his hospitalizations were not due to natural decline. They were the result of attempted murder. His son and daughter-in-law tampered with his medication and cut his brake lines because he chose to protect Leo and expose their crimes. He risked his life to save this boy." Dr. Brenda Cole has cleared him as physically capable of caring for Leo. He has $240,000 in savings and a paid-off home valued at $380,000. He has a detailed plan for Leo's education. More importantly, he has a bond that money cannot buy. Leo knows him. Leo trusts him. Leo loves him. She sat down. Judge Alvarez nodded, her face showing no emotion. She looked at the papers on her bench, then looked up at Audrey. "Miss Vance," the judge said, "please take the stand. I want to hear from you directly." Audrey stood up, walked to the witness stand, and was sworn in. She looked small in the witness box, but she kept her chin high. "Miss Vance," the judge asked, "why do you believe you should have custody of Leo?" Audrey took a slow, trembling breath. "Because I failed my sister," she said, her voice cracking slightly. 10 years ago, when she needed me most, I turned my back on her. I told her she was ruining her life by keeping the baby. I was selfish, and I was wrong. I've regretted it every single day. I didn't know she was struggling. I didn't know about the fence or the harassment. And now she is gone, and I can never tell her I'm sorry, but I can save her son. I want to give Leo the life she wanted for him. I want to be the family Clara didn't have. "Have you ever met Leo?" Judge Alvarez asked. Audrey hesitated. "No, Your Honor. Not yet. Have you ever visited Clara in Hartford?" "No." "Did you send money or offer any assistance over the last 8 years?" Audrey looked down at her hands, tears spilling over her eyelashes. "No, Your Honor. I didn't know." Judge Alvarez nodded. She turned her gaze to our table. "Mr. Cooper, please take the stand." I stood up slowly, the dull ache in my cracked ribs a constant reminder of the price I had paid to be in this room. I walked to the witness box, placed my right hand on the Bible, and was sworn in. The wooden steps of the witness box creaked under my weight. I looked down at the black leather Bible, its surface worn from the touch of hundreds of witnesses who had stood here before me. I placed my calloused hand on it, feeling the texture of the grain. This courthouse had seen so much tragedy, so much betrayal. I swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the truth was the only weapon I had left. I sat down and looked across the room. Abigail Ross approached the stand, her expression encouraging. "Mr. Cooper, how long have you known Leo Vance?" "For 8 years," I said, my voice steady. "Since he was about 1 year old. Can you describe how you met him?" I took a slow breath. "There was a 10-foot wooden fence that my son built right after Clara and Leo moved in. They wanted to block Clara out, but after 6 months, the wood at the bottom of the fence rotted, leaving a hole about the size of a dinner plate. One afternoon I heard a child crying. I knelt down in the dirt and looked through. I saw a tiny, dark-haired boy sitting in the grass, tears on his face. I reached my hand through the hole, and I gave him a small wooden bird I had carved in my workshop that morning. He stopped crying and held it. That was the day I met my grandson." "And did you continue to see him?" Abigail asked. "Yes. Once or twice a week, every single week for 8 years. I would kneel in the mud and Leo would be waiting on his side. I carved him animals, 22 of them in total. A robin, a turtle, a horse, a wolf. I read him stories, passing children's books back and forth through that hole. When he was 5, I showed him how to hold a block of wood and make the first soft cuts. We built a relationship through that wall. For 8 years, while my son and his wife were filing citations and sending lawyers to harass Clara, I was on the other side of the fence trying to build a space where Leo could feel safe and loved." "Did you know he was your grandson at first?" "No," I replied, shaking my head. "Clara didn't tell me. She was afraid that if Julian found out, he would take Leo away or make their lives even worse. She only told me the truth 6 months before she passed. She had a DNA test done and left it in her will for me. She named me as Leo's guardian because she knew I was the only person who had actually been there for him." Audrey's attorney stood up, straightening his tie. He walked to the center of the room, looking at me with a skeptical expression. "Mr. Cooper, you're 68 years old. You've been in the hospital twice in the last 4 weeks. Your son tried to poison you, and then someone cut your brakes, causing a rollover crash. You have 3 cracked ribs, a broken wrist, and a heart condition. Can you realistically care for an active 8-year-old child for the next 10 to 15 years? What happens if you get sick again? What happens if you pass away?" I looked at him, then turned my gaze to the bench, looking Judge Alvarez directly in the eye. I am 68, I said, my voice rising slightly, filled with a conviction that came from the very bottom of my heart. And I have been through a lot this month. But I didn't collapse because of old age. I collapsed because my son tried to kill me. And I didn't roll my car because I lost control. I rolled it because someone cut my brakes. I survived both because I had to. I had to stay alive for my grandson. I leaned forward, my right hand resting on the wooden rail of the witness box. Audrey can give him a 5-bedroom house in San Francisco, I continued, pointing a finger toward their table. She can give him private tutors, music lessons, and a trust fund. She can give him opportunities Clara never had. But a child doesn't need a gilded cage. He needs stability. He needs a home where he feels safe. Leo has spent 8 years living in the shadow of a wall, being harassed and threatened by the people who were supposed to love him. He has just lost his mother. He is terrified. If you take him away from me and send him across the country to live with a stranger in a big house, you will break whatever is left of his spirit. I paused, letting the silence settle in the room. I may only have 10 years left, or 15, or even 5, I said, my voice softening. But during those years, Leo will know he is loved. He will know that someone was willing to risk their life to protect him. He will know his grandfather, and that is worth more than all the money in San Francisco. If I pass away, I have a trust set up, and Miss Taylor has agreed to work with a local guardian. But right now, Leo needs me, and I need him. We are family. Not on paper, but in the dirt by that fence. Audrey's lawyer blinked, his mouth opening as if to speak, but he slowly sat back down. He looked at Audrey, then at the judge, realizing his clinical, financial arguments had been completely dismantled by a simple, honest story. The high-priced legal strategy was nothing compared to the truth. The courtroom was completely silent. Audrey was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, tears streaming down her face. Her attorney stood frozen, his arguments suddenly hollow and useless. Judge Alvarez looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Cooper. You may step down." I walked back to my table, my ribs aching, but my head held high. I sat down beside Abigail, who squeezed my hand. We had laid everything on the line. Now it was up to the judge to decide. Judge Alvarez leaned back in her chair, reviewing her notes for several minutes. The silence in the small courtroom was absolute. The only sound was the clicking of the court reporter's machine. I held my breath, my right hand resting on the table. Before the judge could speak, Audrey stood up. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Her attorney looked up in surprise, reaching out to grab her arm. "Audrey, sit down. The judge is about to." "No," Audrey said, gently shaking off his hand. She looked directly at Judge Alvarez, then turned her eyes to me. "I want to withdraw my petition for custody." The room went completely still. Her attorney blinked in shock, his mouth opening. "Ms. Vance, we have a very strong case." "No, we don't," Audrey said, her voice breaking as tears spilled down her face. She looked at me, a soft, sad expression in her eyes. "Clara chose Mr. Cooper for a reason. I see that now. He was the one who was there. He was the one who loved Leo when no one else did. I won't take that away from my nephew. I've spent 10 years letting my pride stand in the way of my family. I won't do it again by tearing Leo away from the only father figure he has left." She stepped out of the witness box, walked over to our table, and knelt down in front of Leo, who was sitting in his chair, clutching his stuffed rabbit. "Leo," Audrey said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I am your Aunt Audrey. I am so sorry I wasn't there for your mama. And I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I don't want to take you away from your grandpa. I just want to be in your life. I want to be your aunt, if you'll let me." Leo looked at her, his big brown eyes studying her face. He looked up at me, silent and questioning. I smiled and gave him a gentle nod. "It's okay, Leo. She's your family." Leo looked back at Audrey. He reached out his small hand and placed it on her shoulder. "Okay," he whispered. Audrey let out a choked sob, taking his hand and pressing it to her cheek. She stood up and turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I formally withdraw my petition. I ask that full custody be granted to Mr. Walter Cooper." Judge Alvarez took a deep breath, her expression softening. She tapped her pen on the desk. "Very well. In light of Ms. Vance's withdrawal, and based on the extensive evidence of the established emotional bond, the court hereby grants full legal custody of Leo Vance to Walter Cooper. Ms. Audrey Vance is granted generous visitation rights, to be arranged at Mr. Cooper's discretion. This hearing is adjourned. The sound of the gavel felt like a physical shock, a sharp, clean strike that shattered the long nightmare of the last few weeks. I looked at the dark wood of the bench, then at the seal of the state of Connecticut on the wall behind the judge. For years I had taught my history students about the majesty of the law, but I had never felt its power so directly. The law had finally stood between a vulnerable child and the people who wanted to destroy him. Leo immediately scrambled out of his chair and threw his arms around my neck. I caught him with my good arm, pulling him tight against my chest, ignoring the sharp protest of my cracked ribs. I buried my face in his dark curls. "I get to stay with you, Grandpa?" he whispered, his voice muffled. "Yes, buddy," I said, my voice thick with tears. "You're staying with me forever." Audrey walked over to our table as we stood up. She offered her hand, her eyes still red from crying. "Thank you, Walter. Thank you for loving him when I wasn't here." I shook her hand, my grip firm. "You're welcome, Audrey, and you are welcome to visit whenever you want. You are his aunt. Leo needs to know his mother's family." Audrey let out a relieved breath, wiping her eyes. I'd like that very much. My husband Marcus and we want to help. I want to set up a college fund for him, and we can fly out to Hartford for the holidays. I want to make things right. We can do that together," I smiled. As we walked out into the lobby, the marble floors reflected the bright sunlight streaming through the massive glass windows. It felt like walking out of a tomb. The air was fresh and clean, a welcome relief from the sterile smells of the hospital and the courthouse. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was bright and warm, melting the last of the winter frost from the concrete steps. Detective Murphy was waiting by his patrol car. When he saw us walk out, his face relaxed into a wide smile. "Congratulations, Walter," he said, walking up to shake my hand. "Mrs. Taylor just called me from the clerk's office. It's official." "Thank you, Sean," I said. "We couldn't have done it without you." "The trial for Julian and Rebecca starts in 4 weeks, Murphy said, his tone turning serious for a moment. "The prosecutor is ready. We've got Natalie Briggs's confession, the burner phone records, and the forensic match on the pipe cutter. They aren't going to get out. They are looking at decades in prison. Are you ready?" I looked down at Leo, who was holding my hand tightly, his small face bright under the warm sun. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "We are ready. We want justice." "I'll see you in court, Walter," Murphy said, patting my shoulder. He got into his patrol car and drove away. I looked down at my grandson. He was looking at the cars passing by, his small face relaxed and peaceful. The nightmare of my son's betrayal was finally behind us. The police had Julian and Rebecca, the court had granted us custody, and we had rebuilt a connection with Clara's family. As we walked toward my car, I felt a deep, quiet peace settle over me. The 10-foot fence next to my house was still there, but it was no longer a barrier. It was just a reminder of the wall we had broken to build our new life. A few months passed, and our life in the quiet Hartford suburb became peaceful. Leo enrolled in the local elementary school, and his grades were excellent. He spent his afternoons in my workshop, the smell of fresh cedar and pine filling the room as we carved small animals. My cast had been removed and my ribs had finally healed. We were moving forward. But the past has a way of claws back, even when you think you've escaped it. I was sitting at my workbench helping Leo sand the edges of a wooden picture frame when my cell phone buzzed. The caller ID read Hartford Correctional Medical Unit. My grip tightened on the wood. "Hello?" I answered. "Mr. Walter Cooper?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped, came through the line. "This is Dr. Patricia Lawson from the prison hospital. I'm calling regarding your son, Julian Cooper." "What happened?" I asked, my voice flat. "He was assaulted by another inmate in the recreation yard yesterday evening," Dr. Lawson explained. "He sustained severe head trauma, resulting in a large subdural hematoma. We need to perform emergency surgery to relieve the pressure on his brain, but we require consent from his next of kin. His wife, Rebecca Cooper, is also incarcerated here and is legally unable to provide consent. You are the only immediate family member listed in his file. We need you to come in and sign the authorization forms as soon as possible. Without this surgery, he will not survive the night." I looked over at Leo. He was watching me with wide, curious eyes, his sanding block held still. "I'll be there in an hour," I said, and hung up. I drove to the prison in silence. The correctional medical facility was a cold, sterile building attached to the main prison by a reinforced concrete corridor. A guard escorted me through 3 separate security checkpoints, checking my ID and scanning my coat, before leading me to a small consultation room where Dr. Lawson was waiting with a clipboard. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Mr. Cooper," she said, offering her hand. "Your son is in critical condition. The surgery has a 70% survival rate. But I must be honest with you, there is a significant risk of permanent neurological damage, memory impairment, and motor issues. If we don't operate, he will pass away within hours." "Can I see him first?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded to the guard. 5 minutes. They led me down a corridor to a room with a reinforced glass partition. Julian lay in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping monitors and IV drips. His face was swollen, bruised a deep purple, and thick white gauze was wrapped around his skull. His left eye was completely swollen shut. When the guard unlocked the heavy metal door and I stepped inside, his right eye slowly opened. It focused on me and his lips began to tremble. "Dad," he whispered, his voice dry and cracked. I'm sorry. I don't want to die." I stood at the foot of the bed, my arms crossed over my chest. I looked at him, this man who had hit a father of 3 and left him to die, who had built a 10-foot wall to lock out his own son, who had stood by while his wife harassed Clara, and who had walked into my kitchen and poisoned my pills. He was my son, but I felt nothing but a cold, hollow distance. "Why should I sign it?" "Julian?" I asked. My voice was devoid of anger, but it was hard as stone. "You left a man to die in the street. You killed the mother of your son, and you tried to kill me. Why do you deserve a second chance?" Tears began to leak from his one good eye, tracking through the bruises on his face. "Please, Dad. I made terrible mistakes. I was scared. If I live, maybe I can try to make things right, please." I stared at him for a long, silent minute. I thought about the 22 wooden animals lined up on Leo's windowsill. I thought about Clara, who was gone forever, and Victor Martinez, whose children had grown up without a father. And I remembered a question Leo had asked me a few weeks ago. "Grandpa, do bad people ever change?" I turned toward the door where the guard was waiting. "I'll sign the papers," I said, looking back at Julian one last time. "But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Leo. He deserves to know his father is alive, even if he never sees you again. He deserves to know that I didn't let you die the way you let Victor Martinez die. But I will never forgive you, Julian. You are no longer my son." Julian's voice cracked. "Thank you, Dad." I didn't look back as I walked out of the room. Dr. Lawson met me in the hallway with the clipboard. My hand was steady as I signed my name at the bottom of the consent form. The surgery took 4 hours. Julian survived, but the doctors confirmed he had sustained permanent neurological damage. His short-term memory was severely impaired, and he would require months of rehabilitation in a secure medical wing. He would never walk or speak the same way again. I left the hospital that evening and drove back to my house. When I walked through the door, Leo was waiting for me in the living room. "Grandpa," he asked, walking over to me, "is my dad okay?" I sat on the sofa and pulled him close to me, wrapping my arms around him. "He's alive, Leo." The doctors fixed his head. "But he is very sick, and he won't be coming here. He has to stay in the hospital for a very long time. Is he sorry for what he did?" Leo whispered, looking up at me. "I think he is, buddy," I said, brushing a curl from his forehead. "But being sorry doesn't fix what's broken. It only means you have to start trying to be better." Leo nodded slowly, his small hand holding mine. We sat together in the quiet house as the sun went down, the shadows stretching across the floor. We were safe, we were together, and we were finally moving forward. 2 years went by, and the seasons turned in our quiet New England neighborhood. The 10-foot wooden fence that once stood between our properties was gone. I had hired a crew to tear it down, and in its place, we had planted a row of vibrant lilac bushes. Leo was 10 years old now, taller, his shoulders broader, and his fingers steady and confident whenever he held a carving knife. He was no longer the frightened little boy. clutching a stuffed rabbit behind a wall. He had found his place, and he had found his home. The criminal trials had concluded long ago. Rebecca was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy, and was sentenced to life without parole. Julian was convicted of vehicular manslaughter in Victor Martinez's death, along with accessory to murder. Given his severe neurological injuries from the prison assault, the judge sentenced him to 40 years. He was housed in a secure prison medical facility in northern Connecticut. Over those 2 years, Julian had sent 12 letters to my house. I had left the first 11 unopened, stacking them neatly in the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't want to read his excuses or his apologies. I wasn't ready to face the man who had tried to poison me. But one rainy evening in late September, Leo was helping me organize some old history files in my office when he spotted the stack of blue envelopes in the drawer. "What are those, Grandpa?" Leo asked, pointing a finger at them. "Letters," I said quietly. "From your father." Leo's face grew serious. He looked down at his shoes, tracing the edge of the rug. Do you think people can really change?" I set down the files I was holding and looked at him. "I don't know, buddy. I really don't know. Some people try, but trying is a long, hard road." That night, after Leo had gone to bed, I sat at my desk under the single lamp. I looked at the 12th letter, which had arrived just that week. With trembling hands, I tore it open. "Dad." Julian had written in a shaky, uneven script, his motor injuries making writing difficult. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to know something. Every single day, I think about Victor Martinez. I think about Clara, I think about you, and I think about my son. I can't undo what I did. I can't bring Clara back, and I can't take back the fear I caused you. But I am trying. I volunteer in the prison library here. I help other inmates learn to read. It's not enough, and it will never make up for my crimes, but it's the only thing I can do. Please tell Leo that I am sorry. Tell him he deserves a better father than me, and that you are the father I should have been. I only ask that you tell him the truth, Julian." I sat at my desk in the quiet house, and for the first time in 2 years, I wept. I didn't weep for the man in prison, or for the son who had betrayed me. I wept for the boy Julian used to be, the boy who had once walked through the woods holding my hand, before greed and fear had twisted his soul. When I looked up, Leo was standing in the doorway in his pajamas, holding his wooden wolf carving. "Grandpa, are you okay?" I wiped my eyes quickly. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay, just thinking about your dad." Leo walked over and stood beside my chair. "Do you think he is sorry?" "I think he is," I said. "But being sorry doesn't fix what is broken. It just means you have to build something new." Leo nodded slowly. "Can I write to him?" "If you want to, Leo." "Yes." A few days later, Leo handed me a folded piece of notebook paper. "Can you mail this to him?" I unfolded it and read his neat, blocky handwriting. "I don't call you Dad," Leo had written. "Grandpa says you did bad things and that you are sorry. I don't hate you. My mom taught me not to hate people. I am doing good with Grandpa. We carve wood and make pancakes every Saturday. Maybe one day I will visit you. But not now, Leo." I placed his note inside an envelope and I added a brief letter of my own. "Julian," I wrote, "your son has written to you. Read his words carefully. He is stronger and braver than you ever were. Don't disappoint him again, Walter." That evening, Leo and I stood in front of the stone fireplace in the living room. I held the stack of 11 unopened letters in my hands. "Are you sure about this, buddy?" I asked. Leo nodded. "The past is over, Grandpa. We move forward now." I tossed the first letter into the flames. We watched the blue paper curl, turn black, and dissolve into ash. One by one, we burned them all. The smoke rose up the chimney, disappearing into the dark autumn night. Leo took my hand and I squeezed it. We were going to be okay. Looking back, I see my greatest mistake wasn't trusting my son. It was staying silent when I knew something was wrong. I ignored Clara's fear. I dismissed the evidence of the fence. I chose comfort over courage, and the cost was almost a woman's life and my own. Don't make my mistake. If you see someone suffering behind a wall, speak up. If something feels wrong in your family, investigate. If a child needs protection, act, even when it costs you everything. Do not stay silent. The cost is far too high. Thank you for walking with us to the end of this journey. Please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? I'd truly love to hear your perspective. And if our story touched your heart, please consider subscribing so you don't miss our future videos. Remember, while inspired by real social issues and true events, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. Take care of yourself and look out for those around you.